Well, I am very excited to be with my very good dear friend. We were talking about how far back we go, and it's a long time. I may just claim all that, but we've been doing various things together. David Harrison has just completed his 2-year term as poet laureate of Missouri. He has done numerous books and collaborated with Tim Rosinski and others, Mary Jo Fresh and others. And he's got even more books coming. We'll hear about that later on. But just for the moment, I'm going to throw a collage up just to show you how busy David's been. And then David will tell us about himself. And then David has a real treat for us in sharing some of this poetry. Now, I want to do an upfront reminder that the kind of thing that David and Rosinski and others have been doing have had effect sizes larger than the effect size of doing phonics. Now, does that mean we stop doing phonics? Of course not. We keep doing phonics, but we get this as an additional benefit, and a lot of people just don't realize how big an impact this is. And I think after listening to David today, you're going to see why it's a big impact, because he has done so many things to make poetry something that isn't something that people just go, poetry. No, he does it like, oh my gosh, yes. Okay, so David, let me throw that screen up and tell us a little bit about your busyness, and then you tell us about yourself, and then you have some things to share. Okay, so David, take it away.
Dr. Sam, you and I have been good friends for a long time. I have great respect for you, your knowledge, and what you do in the world of early literacy, especially. And you're one of the people I go to when I have a question I need answered by an expert. I follow your blog and your publications, and thank you for what you do.
Well,
Uh,
thank you. Well, thank you for those kudos.
well, you're more than welcome. You've more than earned it. And thank you for inviting me to visit with you today. It means a lot, and I appreciate it. I'm looking at some of these pictures that I sent along to you for background, and I'm going to mention them quickly here, and I may refer back to them. But the picture at the very top shows three views of a bookmobile. That bookmobile is in Pueblo, Colorado. And the folks there at that library bought it to serve kids who live in rural areas, hard to reach areas. And they got in touch with me and asked if I would give them permission to print one of my poems all around that bookmobile. And so, of course, I did. The poem they wanted was My Book, and I'll talk about that briefly. The leg you're seeing there belongs to Mary Schweiz, I'm going to mispronounce it, Schweiwer, I think that's how you pronounce it. Her last name is Coker now. She's married. She teaches at a vocational school and in Ohio, Jeromesville, Ohio. And that's actually the last verse of from a picture book of mine, Piggy Wiglet. And so I've been that same poem is sandblasted into a sidewalk, children's garden at Burton Bar Main Library in Phoenix, Arizona. And that's pretty nice. I'm very, very pleased about that. But I have to say, I don't know many authors who are fortunate enough to have a fan who actually has tattooed part of one of my stories onto her leg. So thank you, Mary. And I'll talk more about her and others. Bugs, Bugs made the Youth Philharmonic Orchestra in Dayton, Ohio. The director there chose this book, Bugs, Poems About Creeping Things, as the centerpiece of a concert, and we can maybe show you the hall here in a minute. Well, actually, that's it down below. Um, so the whole concert was called Bugs, and it featured my book. And from time to time, the orchestra stops and they read a poem of mine from that book. And so the bottom picture, you're looking at me, a kind of a fuzzy, enormous image of me hovering over their shoulders on the background as while the orchestra is playing. So I recorded some of those poems here, sitting where I am now in my office in Springfield, Missouri. And it was some of them were poems for partners, two readers. So I recorded my part of part poems. Then I'd have to pause long enough for a partner I would never meet, one of the students in the orchestra, to read the other half. So we had a great deal of fun doing that. So that's just
And that was an amazing. That's this particular photo just shows the orchestra, but if we were to move back, that was an incredibly large auditorium.
Yeah, it is. It's
It,
just
it,
a gorgeous. Of course, it's an auditorium for the Dayton Civic Symphony. Plus, I don't know what other kinds of activities they have there, but it's just a glorious hall. And
Okay, so that's just some of the different things you've done, and to my, they're very important, but not as important as your poetry, and your idea about books. So from this point forward, it's all about you, and take it over.
well, thank you again. And I I received a lovely fan video just recently, and that's what sort of set this whole idea in motion. There's a young woman. Let me make sure I have my information right. Her name is Shannon Polly, and she's a public librarian in Peter Township near Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania. My son was looking for a used copy of one of my books called Piggy Wiglet and the Great Adventure, which was published in 1973. Well, this young woman had done a library talk and videoed, and it was about Piggy Wiglet and what it had meant to her as a kid. And she credits Piggy in his adventure with how she turned out eventually to become a librarian. So, sort of a life influencing story. And I got to thinking about some of the other um, evidence I've received over the years from people who believe that a story of mine or poem had something to do with how they developed into toward adulthood. And I don't point to me as the only one. Obviously, I'm an example of what can happen when somebody writes something that's published and gets shared by young people here and around the world. Um, but these are, and I get these, my share of these, and I love them. But these are almost all going to be stories, whether they're written as poetry or as just an adventure like Piggy Wiglet. Um, we write a lot of nonfiction books these days, informational books, and those are necessary because our world gets more complicated all the time, and there's just more and more for kids to learn while they're in the learning business in school. Um, but those aren't the ones that you grow up remembering. Those are reference books. What you grow up remembering are the stories. Those those imagination stretching, model demonstrating stories. And since I've written more than 40 of those, I do get my share of reinforcements from that. And I'll give you some examples, and
Okay, I'm going to chime in here for just a minute with a thought, and that is that one of the advantages of using poetry, and especially poems like the ones you're writing and about to demonstrate for us, that it gives you a great deal of meaning in a very compact. Okay, so that's one of the terrific advantages of using poems is that compact in terms of the size of it. You can usually get these done in minutes, not hours, and that is. And the fact that you have such meaningful stories is a good thing. So I just had to make that observation. I'll turn it
well,
back to you.
I totally agree with you, of course. Um, and the picture book is an art form that you may not appreciate until you've tried to write one. And there was an old story about the guy who took his car to the garage because the window wouldn't go up and down, and the mechanic looked at it for a minute and took a pencil out of his pocket and used the eraser to go in and clean off something. And the way they went, the guy said, "Why are you charging me to use your eraser?" And he said, "Well, I'm charging you for knowing where to put it." And and that's kind of like poetry and kind of like writing a story in a short amount of time. My very first book, The Boy with the Drum, is one I want to use as an example, has, I think, 150 words. Well, for heaven's sakes, that's not even a decent paragraph. But it's a whole story, Sam. It tells a tale, and it does it with as few words as possible. Every word counts. I tend to write, many of my storybooks rhyme. They aren't necessarily poems, they are rhymed stories. All the same, they are structured language, easy to read if you're learning to read, easy to remember. And remembering is a key issue here because that's what kids write about when they grow up. I get letters from people who say, well, here's one. Your picture book, A Boy with a Drum, was my favorite when I was a little girl. Uh, I now have, excuse me, I now have grown children. But when they were children, The Boy with the Drum was their favorite. And now we're reading The Boy with the Drum to their children. And it's because these things stick to the memory, ribs of our memories. And so um, here's some more examples. Little Turtle's Big Adventure. This was a short picture book, and it's about a little turtle living beside a pond. He has a good life. He's happy. A lot of creatures around. And then one day bulldozers come through. They destroy the pond. They build a road there. And little turtle has to go off and find someplace else to live. And it takes him a very long time, but he eventually makes it. Now, when that book came out, somebody found it for the Captain Kangaroo show, and it was read on his show by Mr. Green G.
Oh, wow.
So I was very pleased about that. But a few years later, a mother came out of an audience after I finished speaking and brought her little girl to introduce me. She said, "We recently moved from one neighborhood to another, to a new school, new house. Our little girl didn't know anybody. She became despondent, depressed. She cried all the time. We lost our sunny little girl because she didn't know anybody. She didn't have any friends. She didn't have any place to be. And her librarian at school sent her home with a copy of Little Turtle's Big Adventure. And she read that book that night and loved it and hugged it and took it to bed and put it under her pillow and slept with it that night. And the next day she came to the breakfast table, and for the first time in weeks, she was cheerful again. And she said, well, if Little Turtle can do it, I can too. And so she went to school with a totally different attitude, and within days was her cheerful old self again. Sam, that's the important part, not being read alive on Captain
Uh,
Kangaroo Show. That
that is so powerful. That is so powerful.
Yeah, and that reminds all of us who write for kids how important it is. It's not just to see our name in a book, although that's a big thrill. It's the fact that we really do touch lives. And if we do it right, if we get it right, sometimes in very positive ways, such as Shannon Pauley in Pittsburgh or near Pittsburgh, who grew up to become a librarian, and Mary Schweier uh, in Ohio, who has the tattoo on her leg, grew up to become a teacher in a vocational school. She teaches 16, 17-year-olds. She reads Piggy Wiglet every year to them. And she suggests the people who like it the most are my diesel and auto mechanic students. Her sister, um, Becky, lives in Florida, Odessa, Florida, where she teaches kindergarten. And she's a lifelong devotee of Piggy Wiglet. And they have all kinds of things they do at school. Well, um, the Book of Giant Stories is another one that I get letters about because it's about a boy who, and forgive me, ladies and girls, if I tended to write about boys because I know more about them, and so I tend to use them more. Um, but this is a little boy who encounters giants in three different stories in the book, and each case has a problem to solve, and in each case is successful in doing it. And no lives are lost in this story. They all turn out very happily. Uh, Wake Up Son is about a little dog who uh, wakes up in the middle of the night because a flea has bitten him on the ear. He doesn't realize it. He just knows that when he wakes up every day, the sun's up. Well, it's still dark. He doesn't know where the sun could be. And so he wakes up all his other animals. They all go in search of the sun because the sun is overslept. And in the end, the farmer's baby wakes up with all the racket, and just as the sun is coming up over the hills, and the animals are convinced that uh, the farmer's baby is the only one who knows how to wake up the sun. So of course they shower kindnesses, fresh eggs and fresh milk and whatnot for the farmer's baby. I get a lot of feedback from that too, and again for the simple reason that it's a good role model, good character, and kids can identify with. Although it's a silly little light story, it's sold 1,300,000 copies now. And
Holy cow.
it's 82nd, 83rd printing, and it's been in the line since 1986 without ever coming out. So again, I get feedback all the time to remind me of why I do what I do.
Well,
So
what you do certainly is impacting a lot of lives, and it explains the power of some of the other things you've done and some of the other things you've written. Now, I'll make it a point that there will be links to each of the books that you just mentioned here. And in just a second, I'd like to jump off onto the some of the other things you've done. Um, the You've created a library, and I took notes on it. There we go. Poetry in Daily Life, free videos, and I'd like for you to describe what that's about. I'd like for you to mention your blog, and I follow your blog. I just follow you right back, and I'd also like for you to mention your website. And when we're done with that, I've got one other issue I want to deal with, and that's the tons of books that you've written to support the different programs that you and Brzezinski and others have put together. But let's right now focus on the Poetry in Daily Lives, the website and the blog. Tell us a little bit about that.
well, I'm glad to. I just concluded 2 years as serving as was actually the seventh poet laureate for the state of Missouri. The eighth one, who has just taken his office, is Justin Hamm, Hamm, a fine poet and a kindergarten, or rather an elementary school librarian in Mexico, Missouri. And Justin is doing a good job, and I'm delighted to see him come on. But during my term, I went to the Springfield News Leader, editor in chief, and pitched doing a weekly column about poetry. And Amos Bridges said yes. And not many newspapers in the United States are doing that sort of thing these days. So he gave me the opportunity, and I took it and ran with it because I've been in the business long enough that I'm blessed with a lot of friends out there. And so I began to get in touch with other poets, professors, teachers, journalists, editors in this country and in other countries, and say to each of them, I'd like for you to write about a 500-word essay on what poetry means to you, how you use it, where you get your ideas if you're a writer, how you apply them if you're a teacher or a professor. And so I got 60, well, 59 and me. So we wound up doing, with counting some doing more than one column, we wound up doing 100 columns over one a week for 100 weeks. Then I got to thinking, well, the newspapers are archived. I mean, the information is still available, but I needed to introduce these people to a public that could tune in anytime and hear them, actually meet them. So I raised the money, and we just finished the recordings 6 months ago. 52 of these artists reading what they had written rather, for the newspaper. So we have online, YouTube, Poetry from Daily Life, free video library, and anybody anywhere where they can get Wi-Fi can click on that and choose from a menu of all these people, many of whom they will know, reading what they wrote. And yesterday, I went back to the studio and recorded the last 8 introductions, and those will be added to bring it up to 60 within the next few weeks. So this is still a work in progress, but I'm very, very proud of it, and glad we were able to do that.
Well, there'll be a link to it in the blog, in the written part of the blog.
Yes.
Okay. Now about your blog. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, on my blog, several years ago, 2009, I decided that I needed a website. So many people I knew were developing websites, and I didn't really know what that was for sure. So I shopped around. I found a woman whose work I admired, Kathy Tiemann, and so we contracted to build a website. So she did that, and it's a really well done website. I'm proud of it. And then she said, "You need a blog." I said, "I don't know what that is. I don't like the sounds of it. It's a naughty word, blog." Yeah. And so she said, "Well, I'll fix it for you, and I'll post something so you'll know how." And then she left me. And so I've stumbled around and started posting things, and I've been doing it ever since. And I miss very, very few days, almost every day of my life. I get up at 6 o'clock each morning to start work. And the first thing I do, well, I answer a few emails that came in overnight, but then I get to that blog and post something that's on my mind or something that's been going on, and links to other resources. So, yeah, I've done almost 5,000 of those things now.
Wow. And then finally, your website, and especially the poetry challenges that you sometimes make on that website. But tell us
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. As a matter of fact, right now I'm lamenting that I'm lousy at writing sequels, and some of the things that have been very meaningful in the as I measure it based on feedback from readers, like that Piggy Wiglet, for example. Um, for the life of me, I can't recreate that character doing something else. My brain tells you what I need, what I want to tell you, and then it moves on, and I can't come back. And so I've spent this last week, chasing Piggy Wiglet into the dead ends, trying my best to get a sequel. But people say what I like about Piggy Wiglet is that he had a big dream of chasing the sun and catching it. And in the end, it all ended happily. And I loved that story. Well, whatever I have, how do you beat that? How do you have Piggy Wiglet beat catching the sun, for heaven's sake? So anyway, that's my story.
Okay.
Do I have time to read a poem or two? Or
Yeah, well, how about I'm looking at the clock and I'm taking maybe a couple of short ones because we want to keep it to a.
yeah,
But absolutely.
okay. Well, one from Bugs is this is a book of short poems, and the shortest one in here is "A Tick's Friends." A tick has no friends, therefore my story ends.
Oh my gosh.
Well, here's my book that was etched or sandblasted into the children's garden sidewalk and on the bookmobile in Pueblo. I did it. I did it. Come and look at what I've done. I read a book. When someone wrote it long ago for me to read, how did he know that this was the book I'd take from the shelf and lie on the floor and read by myself? I really read it, just like that, word by word from first to last. I'm sleeping with this book in bed, this first book I ever read.
Wow. That is amazing. Now, one last, I mean, everything you've said is just so amazing already, but there's one last round of things that you've done that really I think is game changing for everyone that's interested in literacy. And that is the work that you've collaborated with various authors, where you have created we talk about the storybook stories, the stories for young children, but you've created things that also work with the older child and are basically books that give easy to read, and they've been put into various programs. I think you and Rosinski and others collaborated on one very special book about the fluency lesson plan, but you've got tons and tons and tons of those kinds of things, and they work. I know a lot of what you talked about earlier seemed to work a lot with the younger children, but these work with the older kids, and these are the kinds of things that, especially the fluency lesson plan, that actually can get gains larger than the gains you get from phonics. And of course, I'm saying again, yes, do the phonics, but do this too. And I don't think people realize how powerful it is, or that it's also for the older kids. So if you could just say a few words about the different collaborations and things you've
Yeah,
done
sure.
with that.
Yeah, the first collaboration I ever did was with D or B. Cullinan, who was used to, she's deceased now, but she taught at NYU and she was a president of ILA when it was ILA. And so she and I wrote the book and I wrote the poems and she did the activities. And so set up a pattern. And then I went from there and met with Tim. And Rosinski and I struck up a friendship and began to do similar collaborations in that I provide the poems to fit whatever the need is for that particular book. And then the professor, co-writer, adds in whatever needs to be done by way of explanations and activities that teachers can use and apply to the classroom. And then I met Mary Jo Fresh, another professor emeritus. She's from the Ohio State University. Tim is from the Kent State, and worked with Laura Robb and others. And so altogether at this point, I think I've had over 1,500 poems published, in print in various books. And Sam, a lot of them have occurred in these 18 or 20 books for the classroom because they're quite demanding. The book I'm working on right now on phonics, by the way, it's still fresh, will have 100 of my poems in it. And when you start with a word, a sound, not even a full word, from the rhymes, and develop a poem, a narrative, a story based on the sound of ugh. So it's a real challenge for me, and of course, I'm very happy with the results and the opportunity. It's a great opportunity to reach into so many classrooms for so many years, almost a quarter of a century now, and touch the lives of kids that way.
Okay, well, I will make it a point to have all that kind of things too. Now, I have one last thought. This is really crazy. I don't know. But your friend Sam has noticed that the moon hasn't come back here in St. Louis. The moon's missing. It's supposed to have come back and it didn't. So I don't know if that's a problem that Piggy Wiggly could get on or not, but it's just a thought. And
That sounds like a job for Piggy Wiglet.
Yes, it does. So I don't know. That's my wild and crazy ending here. But thank you so much for everything you've done. I mean, any one of these things would have been major. And when you put all that together, you've just had an amazing career. And so thank you for all you do with literacy. Now, I always give people a chance at the very end. If Dr. Sam moved things along too fast and left something out that you really wanted in, now's your chance. But otherwise, it's time to say goodbye and do a Zoom wave goodbye. But first of all, anything that I should have touched on and we missed?
No, I think as always, you know the material and you know your stuff and you cover it beautifully. And as I understand it, when you provide me with links that I can put on my blog, people will also have that way to reach out and see what we've been doing today, and they can get in touch with me too that way if they have any questions, as well as reaching to you.
Right. Okay. Well, my last little tradition, and I know it's silly, but I do it every time, and that is we give great big smiles and we give a Zoom wave goodbye.
See you,
Goodbye,
everyone.
everybody, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam.